Welcome to the second MMA Lockcast episode for the week. I am your host, Manpreet, aka MMA Lock of the Night, and your boy on social media at MMALOTN. I am also the architect behind the MMA Fight Archive, ensuring you leave no stone unturned when you're researching these upcoming MMA events. The reason I know so much about the fighters that I'm about to break down for you guys is because of the MMA Fight Archive, and I ensure that there are as many direct links to past fights for all of these competitors, not to mention other crucial links that you need to learn about these fighters, know what they're all about, what they've been up to. We have it all on the MMA Fight Archive. We have close to 4,300 fighter profiles spanning 17 different promotions from all over the world. We're closing in on 95 subscribers now as well. So steady growth on a week-to-week basis over there. So I appreciate all the support for everybody that's hopped on since. And you can try it out for free as well with a 7-day trial. Link in the description below. Once again, that is the MMA Fight Archive. See what all the hoopla is about. And if you study, break down, research, or analyze fights yourself, this is going to help you save a boatload of time and ensure you get everything you need for all of these fighters. All right. We're going to be breaking down Bellator Championship Series San Diego for this card. It is headlined by a lightweight title fight between Usman Nurmagomedov taking on his toughest challenge to date in Alexander Shabliy. This is essentially the lightweight Grand Prix finale that Bellator did not get to complete before the sale to PFL, but they are stepping in here to have this fight on. This is the fight to make. This is the highest level fight that Bellator is capable of making with the current roster that they have, and I'm very happy that they are getting the chance to throw down here, really going to show whether Usman is truly the best lightweight outside of the UFC, and he has a very stiff opponent to try to prove that against. Co-main event showcases former UFC fighter and Bellator veteran Lorenz Larkin looking to add upon his victory from earlier this year to Alan Dominguez, taking on Levon Chokheli, who looks to continue his winning ways. Aaron Jeffery takes on former champion Douglas Lima, and not to mention other Bellator names that you're familiar with sprinkled out throughout the card. A boatload of MMA this weekend. UFC on Saturday, Bellator on Saturday. Obviously broke down both of those cards for you guys on the YouTube channel. There is also Cage Warriors and OKTAGON going down on Saturday morning. I'll have written breakdowns for those on the Lock of the Night Patreon page. So if you want some appetizer action for the big fights on Saturday nights, you guys can get it started with Cage Warriors and OKTAGON and on the Lock of the Night Patreon page. But there is also dessert on Sunday morning with ACA, and probably, in my opinion, the best featherweight on the planet, Islam Omarov, headlining the card. He's a minus 1,500 favorite on the card, but get familiar with that kid. He's still young enough to eventually make the jump over to the UFC. Very, very talented. One of the best wrestlers I've ever seen. Make sure you guys check him out. It's a 19-fight card from ACA, which normally showcases some solid talent throughout. But I will break down those fights as well for the Lock of the Night Patreon, folks. So again, tap in to the MMALOTN Patreon page. Link in the description below. All right. We got, I believe, 10 fights scheduled for this Bellator card. There were some fights that fell out last week or 2 weeks ago. Marcos Breno was supposed to take on Rafion Stotts. A couple other fights that fell out as well, but still a decent offering from Bellator, again, headlined by that big-time lightweight fight. So let's get right into it. Let's break these down pretty briefly. I'm not going to go as in-depth as I normally do with the UFC, so I'll try to get this done in a timely and efficient manner for you guys. And again, this fight is on Saturday, so dropping this relatively early compared to what I normally do for a Bellator and PFL card. So appreciate the love. Drop a comment, drop a like, drop a subscribe if you haven't already, if you enjoy what you've been seeing from your boy. All right, let's get right into it. First fight of the night, Asia Cortez coming in at plus 110, going up against Ashley Thiner coming in at minus 130. Classic grappler versus striker matchup here. Both of these women making their professional MMA debut. Starting on the Cortez side, she's been training at American Top Team, coming from a wrestling background, although it's very difficult to tell how effective she can actually be with it. She is 3-0 as an amateur. There is no footage on her as an MMA fighter, but she is training with the Room Filler Killers, often training with Karolina Kovacevic, Kayla Harrison, all the other killer women that they have at American Top Team. And Thiago Alves has seemingly taken a liking to her, which is why you often see her in her corner and splattered all over her Instagram page. Ashley Thiner comes from a Muay Thai background. She has several titles and medals that she's won over the last several years, and you can see how fluid she is when she is is in the striking range. She throws a lot of good combinations, nasty high kicks, and it seems like she's improving her takedown defense enough to deal with fighters that are looking to take her to the ground. The big question mark in this matchup is how good Cortez actually is. There's just not enough legitimate footage out there to make an educated prediction here on either side, but from what I've been seeing, Thainer looks very, very clean in the striking realm, and her defensive grappling has looked good enough, even though it might not be against fighters that could be as good wrestlers as what Cortez brings to the table. I will lean with the fighter that I expect to get off more damage here, and that's going to be Thainer. She can stay aggressive off of her back if Cortez looks to take her down, but as long as this fight takes place in the striking realm, Thainer will have a legitimate advantage in that spot. But this will be a good test for both women to see what their potential ceiling could be, but also to see how good Cortez is or isn't. But I'm going to go Thainer here, and Thainer by decision. Next up, Josh Hokit coming in at -170, going up against Sean Rose, coming in at +525. We'll start off on the Hokit side, who comes from a wrestling background. He was also a college football player. He's been training down at Jackson Wink alongside his brother, Isaiah Hokit, who also has an impressive collegiate wrestling career. Hokit made his debut back in October, and his wrestling wasn't looking as good as you would expect from somebody coming from the collegiate wrestling scene, but I was impressed with his ability to apply a basic striking approach. He utilized a consistent jab and cross down the pipe and had good enough cardio for a heavyweight of his stature. When it finally came down to it, he was able to get the takedown in the third round and quickly get an arm triangle choke against his opponent. He's very solid, at least as a basic MMA fighter, with especially only one fight under his belt. I am impressed from what I've been seeing from him. I would just like to see him continue to grow at a gradual level. His opponent, Sean Rose, is a bit of a experienced regional fighter at this point in time. He has 5 total fights, a record of 2-2. One of his losses actually got changed to a no contest after his opponent popped for steroids. Just take a look at the guy. Surprise, surprise, he popped for steroids. But that fight was a fight that his opponent was a wrestler, got Rose down relatively easy, and eventually got that ground and pound finish. Rose, decent striker, has been working with the Alliance MMA guys over there in San Diego, so it makes sense why he's actually on this card. When he gets into his flow state with his striking, he's not too bad, but the big hole in his game is the grappling game, and I think that's where Hokit's going to have a lot of success. It may not have worked out for him so much early in his first fight, but I expect him to work here against Rose. I really think that we're going to see Hokit drag this fight to the ground, and I think he ends up coming out with another arm triangle victory. The Hokit by submission at +120, not a bad spot to take a shot on, rather than the big -750 line, which is not a line I normally like to lay for fighters that are still very, very young in their career, especially only coming into their second fight. But Hokit showed some good work in his first fight, so I wouldn't be surprised if he's able to go out there and actually look like a -750 favorite. Speaking of big favorites, we got Bryce Meredith coming in at -650, going up against John MaCalolooy. Let me try to pronounce this. MaCalolooy. Probably butcher that. I'm just going to go John. He comes in at +475. Now, Bryce Meredith comes from an impressive collegiate wrestling background as well. We've seen him utilize that approach in most of his matchups. Even when he can't get too much control on the ground, he does a good job in terms of mixing his striking to eventually get the takedown and then get some more control time from there. He works with a great gym, the MMA Lab down there in Arizona, and they've done a great job in terms of transforming him into a complete mixed martial artist. Last time around, he faced a BJJ black belt who made it a little bit awkward for Meredith to establish that top position, but it was impressive to see the scrambles of Meredith to stay out of bad positions from the BJJ black belt, and then also start raining down big shots of his own and win a decisive unanimous decision victory that night. On the flip side for John, he has not competed in MMA in over 12 and a half years. He is a BJJ brown belt who seems to be instilled as a coach over the last several years. And funnily enough, he actually cornered Bryce Meredith's second last opponent, Miguel Pinebert. Pinebert took that fight on short notice, and John took a big interest in that matchup. And it's funny that he's actually going to be the one fighting Meredith this weekend. Unfortunately for MaCalolooy, I think he's going to struggle dealing with the wrestling of Meredith here, not to mention being away from action for over 12 and a half years. I don't know if he could provide the necessary jiu-jitsu to cause Meredith issues. I think we'll see Meredith flow very well from that top position. I think he can grind MaCalolooy out. The over 1.5 at -150 is intriguing to me, as 4 out of the 6 wins on Meredith's record have come over that 1.5 round mark. But the big question mark is on the John side. Not entirely sure what he's going to bring to the table, if he has good enough durability, if he has a good enough gas tank to go over 7.5 minutes, going up against the guy as pressure centric as Meredith. So I might end up staying off the over 1.5, but I do think we'll see Meredith dominate this matchup pretty easily, grind out MaCalolooy, and win this fight. I'm going to say on the scorecards, but again, not a whole lot of confidence on the prop there. All right, next up, Masayuki Kikuiri, coming in at -375, going up against San Diego native Herman Terrado, who comes in at +300. Now, it's been a long time since we've seen Kikuiri. It's been a year and a half, actually, but he is riding a 3-fight winning streak, most recently getting that nasty knockout over Alexei Shirkevich. That was a fight, again, over a year and a half ago. That's stamped a 3-fight winning streak for Kikuiri, which actually includes a victory over a fighter that gave Kikuiri his last professional loss. So it's nice to kind of have that avenged. He's a striker, very mobile striker, loves to move forward, loves to put pressure on his opponents, has good shots down the pipe, very good quick combinations, but I have a little bit of an issue with this striking defense. Now, he hasn't been knocked out in terms of the striking realm. He has been knocked out from a ground and pound strike, but in terms of the stand-up realm, he is hittable, but his durability has allowed him to get out of some bad situations. We saw Shirkevich actually land some big shots on him, but luckily Kikuiri's durability was still there, and he was able to eventually find that knockout, like I said, in the second round. That's his style. Output, volume, pressure, striking. His opponent, Terrado, +300 underdog, prior to his last fight, which actually took place at Bellator 300, where he came up short against Mohamed Burkamov. He had taken 5 years off, which is very weird considering those are like the prime years of his life. He's now 34 years old, 33 or 34. And I'm not entirely sure why he was out of competition for that long. He had a win over Joao Zeffarino during the early PFL days, but now he's on a 2-fight losing streak, most recently getting that loss to Mohamed Burkamov, where he just got stuck at distance. He had no answer for Burkamov's striking and pressure, and I don't know if it was the threat of the potential takedown coming from Burkamov, but for about 12.5 minutes, we saw Burkamov just walk him down and beat him to the punch down the pipe, and Terrado had no answer for anything that was coming back his way. At the end of the fight is when we saw Burkamov go for the takedown and hold Terrado down. But Terrado is also a BJJ black belt. It just does not seem he is all that threatening, especially with his lack of wanting to actually get fights to the ground. Maybe he fights differently here with Kikuiri not having as much of a wrestling threat. So maybe we see Terrado actually try to pick up the pace in this matchup, which is why it makes me a little bit cautious to actually take Kikuiri as a -375 favorite. I don't have enough information in terms of figuring out if he has a good enough ground game to deal with a BJJ black belt like Terrado. But again, Terrado to me seems more of a guy that's physically imposing than he is actually imposing. And I think that could allow Kikuiri to really just walk him down, land his straight shots down the pipe, demoralize Terrado from closing the distance and try to go for takedowns. But if Kikuiri can keep this in the striking realm, he should have a major success keeping Terrado at bay, landing those big shots, and coming away with a decision victory. The over 1.5, not a bad line here around that -180 line, as I think Terrado is going to be difficult to put away. And I'm going to think that Kikuiri has a good enough defensive grappling game that Terrado won't be able to finish him there. So give me Kikuiri by decision, but the over 1.5 is probably where I would lay my money more than the Kikuiri chalky line. All right, next up, we got a great wrestlers matchup here between Jordan Newman coming in at +285, going up against Dagestani wrestler Imam Shafi Aliev coming in at -360. Now, Newman is a 2-time NCAA All-American, training out of Askins Wrestling Academy, as well as Rufus Sport, probably your best tandem that you can get up there in Wisconsin. Obviously, Newman coming from a wrestling background, continuously sharpening that aspect of his game with a high-level wrestler like Askren, but not to mention overall his overall MMA game being sharpened by the guys over at Rufus Sport. He is a highly touted prospect that that Bellator has slowly been grooming. He hasn't been facing the toughest competition, so this will truly be his toughest test to date, but he does have a 6-0 record that he was able to establish through his early Bellator career. He's a good scrambler, great wrestler. His jiu-jitsu is catching up as well, and his striking still needs a little bit of work, but again, he is working on it with the guys over there at Rufus Sport, which is mainly known for its striking, but it is a mixed martial arts gym. His opponent, Imam Shafi Aliev, has not competed since November of 2022, the night which he landed a beautiful elbow against Sean Connor Fallon in a ground and pound position, and that opened up a cut that caused a referee to stop the fight. Now, Aliev is a wrestler, as you would assume somebody would be from Dagestan, but I'm not so impressed with his ability to dish out damage from that top position besides his last matchup. Normally, he just looks to control his opponents as much as he can, get some chipping shots so that the referee doesn't end up standing them up. But he does kind of remind me of Omari Akhmedov in the fact that his body language does not look great in deep waters, but he still does enough that he can still get opponents to the ground and just grind them out. His striking is what you would expect from a wrestler, a lot of explosive movements, a lot of big power to eventually change levels and get fights to the ground. But that's where I think he could be weakest if opponents can kind of stop those takedowns and force him to strike and probably stress him out, which would eventually start to slow him down even more. I'm kind of surprised that Aliev is at minus 360 here. Newman has a wrestling background that could potentially cause Aliev some trouble here. Now, Aliev could likely get the better of the early exchanges, but as we get into deeper water, I think Newman actually has the better gas tank, and that could prevail for him later on in this matchup. At plus 285, I think Newman is worth a shot considering how much closer I expect this fight to be than it is on paper. I think if Aliev had more of a westernized name, maybe this line is not as big as it is. Normally, we know that there's that Dagestani Russian tax on price tags because people just love betting those guys, and more often than not, it pays off for them. But looking at this fight and taking into consideration Newman's wrestling background, he could have some success in terms of causing Aliev trouble, providing enough resistance that it caused Aliev to make some bad decisions, and Newman could potentially capitalize on that. And Aliev's experience, although probably mediocre as well on the regional scene, it is a little bit more of a tougher strength of schedule than what Newman has fought. But maybe this is the opportunity Newman has been waiting for to actually showcase that he deserves to be fighting these higher ranked and higher difficulty opponents here. So I'm going to go Newman by decision. Very small shot here, but I think he can do, or at least he can cause enough trouble to Aliev to make this spot look good enough in terms of value. All right, next up, Yancy Medeiros coming in at plus 300, going up against Jora Ayvazyan coming in at minus 400. Medeiros, it's been over a year and a half since we've seen him throw down. Last time around, he was able to get that club and sub victory over Charlie Leary. That ended up being turned to a no contest as he did pop, I believe, for marijuana. I could be wrong on that, but he did pop for something that caused that fight to be changed to a no contest. He was on a 4-fight losing streak before eventually getting cut from the UFC. He picked up a big win over Emmanuel Sanchez, got that win over Charlie Leary as well. But I don't know if he's just at the stage of his career where he can compete against guys that provide as much resistance and effectiveness as a 14-1 fighter like Ayvazyan. Ayvazyan has cut his teeth pretty much on the Russian regional scene, mainly fighting for Eagle FC and fighting some very difficult competition over there. Very good wrestler. His striking has a lot of power, explosions, but when he has a clear wrestling advantage, that's where he utilizes against fighters to take them to the ground and grind them out. Medeiros, I think he's more of a dog than anything, and he could potentially provide Ayvazyan some issues here, but I think he's going to struggle to deal with the relentless wrestling pace that Ayvazyan will continuously put him in these spots. Medeiros getting up there as well. He's going to turn 37 on the day of this fight. And I just don't think it ends up working out too well for him. I'm going to go with the Bellator newcomer, Jora Ayvazyan, and I think he ends up winning this fight on the scorecards pretty easily. Next up, Bellator prospect Sumiko Inaba comes in at minus 155, goes up against Mackenzie Stiller, who comes in at plus 135. Now, Inaba, she was a minus 700 favorite in her last fight, which was her PFL debut, and it became a much closer fight than it should have been. She had some good success in the first round with a lot of clinch work, dirty boxing, and knees. In the second round, her opponent was very aggressive and landed some big shots while pushing Inaba backwards, and she also had even more success in the third round. But luckily for Inaba, two judges still saw that fight in her favor, and she was able to win that fight on the scorecards. Now, Inaba, at her best, utilizes her footwork and movement to strike her opponents from distance distance, utilizing a lot of combinations, volume, and good disciplined, clean shots down the pipe. Now, even though she has, she's still, I think, only 8 fights into her professional career, she is 33 years old. So she really needs to get it going if she wants to at least touch gold of any sort in Bellator or PFL. But continuing to work on her game, and for her to learn from her last fight, which was a fight that she won by the skin of her teeth, and then even the fight before that where she lost to Denise Keelholz. She has some things she could still improve. Luckily for her, she'll have a legitimate striking advantage here over the grappler Mackenzie Stiller, who is a judo black belt as well as a BJJ brown belt. She's undefeated through her amateur and pro career. She's 4-0. Right now, she was 4-0 as an amateur, submitting all 4 of her opponents on the regional scene. She played spoiler to Benson Henderson's wife, Maria Henderson, and she was able to submit her in 3 minutes. She ended up defeating Kiara Penso, a fighter that had over 10 more fights of experience than her, but she utilized some good judo and good grappling to keep Penso in some bad spots. But on the feet, it did not look all that good for her. I think Inaba has good enough takedown defense and awareness in the cage that she should be able to keep this fight in the striking realm. And I think she should be able to punish Stiller pretty easily here. The line was closer to -125 a few days ago. Now it's swelling up to about -155, -165. And I think that's starting to show that the sharps are coming in on this line and trying to take advantage of it. I do think Inaba is good enough to keep away from the judo and jiu-jitsu of Stiller. And even if she does find herself on the mat here, I don't think she'll be in a whole lot of trouble. I think we'll see her eventually work back to her feet, and then from there, get back to her striking, where she should be able to land more damage, nullify the ground control of Stiller, and eventually win this fight on the scorecards. All right, next up, former welterweight champion Douglas Lima coming in at +145, going up against Aaron Jeffery, who comes in at -170. Now, we'll start off on the Douglas Lima side, who finally snapped a 4-fight losing streak last time around, as he was able to chip away at Costello Van Steenis after a slow start. He was able to win the next 2 rounds and get his hand raised. It seemed to me he went back to the basics in that fight. A lot of pot shotting, a lot of leg kicks, and that was enough for the referees or the judges to actually see the fight in his favor. He is 35 now, 36 if I'm not mistaken. I think he is more so on the decline than anything. Sorry, he turned 36 at the beginning of the year. And it all depends on the stylistic matchup that he has ahead of him. Usually guys have been able to take him to the ground and grind him out. They've also been able to keep him in uncomfortable positions for long periods of time, and he's kind of struggled to get back out into distance to get back to his striking game. But that is where he is most comfortable, when he can establish his kicks and utilize his speed and his power down the pipe. Unfortunately for him, he's going up against a guy that likes to very dirty fight in Aaron Jeffery. Jeffery makes no bones about it. Every single time out, he crashes forward, hooks his opponent up, pushes them up against the cage, and eventually starts getting to work by getting his head position in place, and then from there starting to get some dirty boxing and some knees and really wearing his opponents down. What he was able to do against Dalton Rosto was very impressive, and I believe that was also Rosto's first professional loss. But then Jeffery, he was very close to actually picking up that win over Fabian Edwards last time around. Had a strong first round. Lost the second round as Edwards was finally able to get off the cage and land some good enough damage. And then in the third round, a very close round. I thought it could have gone Jeffrey's way as well. But again, I think there was maybe some hometown cooking on the Fabian Edwards side. But regardless, I think Jeffery is still a very difficult opponent for a lot of people to deal with. And I don't know if Lima will have as much... what's the word that I'm looking for? Enough just... impulse to get off and get out of these bad positions, as we saw from Fabian Edwards last time. I think Jeffery will be able to keep him up against the cage. I think Jeffery will be able to chip away at him here. It's tough to fade a guy that was as dominant as Douglas Lima was, which is why I'm not overly confident in Jeffery in this spot, especially with him being at the chalky price of -170. But I do still lean Jeffery in this spot, and I think we see him grind this fight out and end up winning it on the scorecards. Maybe taking Jeffery by decision, probably a better way than playing that -170 chalk. I think it will be very difficult for him to put Douglas Lima away. All right, co-main event time. We got Lorenz Larkin coming in at -115, going up against Chokheli, who comes in at -105. We'll start off on the Larkin side, who was able to bounce back into the win column in June as he was able to put on a statement-making performance over Alan Dominguez. Larkin showed off his ability to stop takedowns, keeping fights in the striking realm, where he was able to chip away at Dominguez and eventually find that knockout victory. Larkin has actually been on a very steady run as of late. Since getting cut from the UFC, he was on a 7-fight winning streak, which ended with a split decision loss to Andrei Koreshkov of a weight that he actually defeated Koreshkov in their initial meeting back in October 2019. But now he's 8-1 over his last 9 fights, and he turned 38 on Tuesday of fight week, but he's still fighting at a pretty high level. Improved takedown defense, nasty striking, as we obviously know, nasty elbows, as we saw him put away Mohamed Burkamov, nasty leg kicks, as he showcased when he went against Neil Magny so many years back. But he is a very nasty striker. Now, Chokheli, he's firmly on a 3-fight winning streak right now. He continues to take steps up in competition. Anytime he faces a big-named opponent, that's usually when he ends up coming on the short end of the stick, just like when he lost to Oti Yamauchi, and just like he lost to Kyle Crutchmer, I believe it was as well. But Chokheli, power striker, but also has a sneaky takedown game with trips and throws where he's able to get opponents to the ground and grind them out from that top position. I really thought Michael Lombardo was going to be a guy that was able to cause him enough issues, but Chokheli was able to get some well-timed takedowns and control that fight for the most part. He's still just 27 years old. He's obviously still improving, but I think that this is going to be a tough matchup for him to go up against a veteran like Larkin. Had Larkin not been 38 years old coming into this matchup, I'd probably have even more confidence in him in this spot, but I still think he's good enough to deal with the takedown game of Chokheli, keep this fight in the striking realm, and batter Chokheli on the feet, and I think that eventually leads to a knockout victory for him. I think this is going to be a violent matchup no matter who ends up getting their hand raised, so taking the under or fight doesn't go to decision would not be a bad way to go about it, but I'm still going to lean with the veteran Larkin here, who has shown that he is still a very high-level opponent and very high-level fighter at this stage of his career. So I'm going to go Larkin, and Larkin by knockout. And that brings us to our main event, Usman Nurmagomedov coming in at -355, going up against Alexander Shabliy, who comes in at +280. Now, his 2 straight successful title defenses for Nurmagomedov, although his last win over Brent Primus was overturned to a no contest after a failed drug test from Nurmagomedov. He was a -2200 favorite going into that fight with Primus. Pretty much did whatever he wanted. Outstruck Primus. Ended up going to his takedowns. But Nurmagomedov is a guy that came from a striking background and eventually developed the wrestling with his Dagestani brothers. And now he is pretty much one of the more complete mixed martial artists that we have in the world. Very good takedowns, very good scrambling. Probably is the best lightweight outside of the UFC. Probably could be a top 5 lightweight should he be in the UFC. But he's going up against a stiff opponent here, and Alexander Shabliy, who has clearly made it known that he is the other best lightweight outside of the UFC. He's riding a 9-fight winning streak, 5 of those which came in the came with Bellator. He is a master and high-level striker, utilizes distance management very well, pivoting off after combinations, very good striking defense. His ability to manage the distance also helps his ability to snuff out takedowns that his opponents are looking to get on him to stay away from the striking approach that he normally brings to the table. He also has some pretty good wrestling of his own if he wants to lean on that. He has for a long time trained with American Top Team, at least over the last couple of years, but it seems going into this matchup, he stayed in Russia and actually had solid training sessions with Arman Sarukian, who we know is also a top lightweight and probably next in line to fight Islam Makhachev. This is a great fight. This is not a fight that should have Usman Nurmagomedov at -355. I honestly think that Nurmagomedov probably should be closer to maybe -160, -170, maybe even -185, which would be about 65% implied. But to have him at -355 is way too disrespectful to Alexander Shabliy, who should and could stop the takedowns of Nurmagomedov. And then if this ends up being a striking battle for 25 minutes, Shabliy going to make it way closer than the odds actually indicate here. So this is going to be one of those weird spots where I actually end up picking Nurmagomedov to win this matchup, because if his wrestling does end up coming in play and he's able to get some good spots where he can control a little bit of time before Shabliy gets back to his striking, then obviously Nurmagomedov can be competitive in the striking as well. So he should be the favorite. He should win this fight. But again, if this plays out mainly in the striking round, Shabliy is going to make it very difficult for Nurmagomedov to retain his title once again, which is why I'll predict Nurmagomedov to win this matchup, but I am compelled to take a shot on the Shabliy side as such a big underdog, as this will be a very competitive matchup. So again, prediction, Usman Nurmagomedov by decision, but bet would be Shabliy considering the big odds here. All right. There you guys go. Breakdowns for Bellator San Diego. They do have another show next week. I believe it's the Dublin card. I could be wrong on that, but I will be back for breakdowns for that. Obviously, I got a ton of other great UFC content dropping on the YouTube page, so make sure you guys check that out if you want some more looks and plays there. Obviously, like I said, OKTAGON, Cage Warriors, and ACA going down this weekend as well, all which I'll have breaking down in written form on the MMALOTN Patreon page, so make sure you guys check that out. All right. Appreciate the love. Appreciate the support. Drop a comment, drop a like, drop a subscribe. I'll see you guys later for a ton of other great content. Peace.